came and interfered with the life of the people of the land when they came. They got people believing that when they got here, it was all woods and forests. And every now and then, some tribe pop up out of nowhere and say, who is you and where you from? It don't work like that. First of all, we had castles all over the place. They still here. They just makeshifted them in state buildings, mental institutions, and prisons, but we act like they just built them. We didn't need prisons before they came. Now all of a sudden we need prisons. Who need prisons? A police state, because they need somebody to put the ones they capture. So they got to create a prison. We solved the problem. We didn't let the problem linger on while you sitting in a cage for 30 years. No, the problem lasting too long at that point. Solve the problem. That's the tribal way. Solve the problem. You're not finna punish this man forever. You either he gonna do something to remedy his situation, and if he deserves death, we just gonna go and chop his head off. We're not finna be torturing people for 35, 40 years. That's bad energy on the land. We don't want that stuff lingering. You gotta go back to the culture.
That's right. Niche?
I don't have anything at this moment.
So I do have a question. So when we're talking about like people changing our classifications and everything, and we don't really have a clear view of who we are, what about the other people that are here? We tend to sum up like the Mexicans that are here and the white people that are here and everything, but do we know who they truly are, and do we know who our enemies truly are?
We know who majority of everybody on the land is. It only take us a minute to know that they ain't from over here, or if they got some of the blood from the tribes, you could tell. When you got pale faces doing the bus stop, not missing the beat, they got some blood. They didn't been amalgamated. They forgot about the rape campaign when the sisters was being raped and having the babies. And then they forgot about after the so-called emancipation, when we was able to be trustees prisoners on the land instead of bondage prisoners, the ones who could pass dipped into the other society in order to escape the persecution of the ones that was darker. Where they all go? Where they at today? So even when you go to Southwestern America and you go into Mexico, there's still Afro-Mexicans that's been there way before Columbus came. They down there still practicing their tribal traditions, all up in the hills. Emilio Zapata, pull him up. Look at his hair. He was the leader of the real revolution of the islands. He was the one who influenced Che Guevara. He was the same one Pancho Villa sold out. We don't want to talk about the sellouts. We want to glorify the sellouts. No, Emilio Zapata is the one. Pancho Villa was celebrated by the culture after he sold out Zapata. Go look it up. I ain't making it up. Look up the Zapatista Liberation Army. They still there. They never stopped fighting. Even after their leader was killed, they still never stopped fighting to this day. They still in the mountains, Zapatista. Still, when the settlers come up there, they give them the business so they don't go up there messing with them no more. They already gave them the warning. And the question is, why do Chief Michigan know more about the Zapatista than the Mexicans? So we got to know who's who on the land, because I know where they all at and how they move.
She dropped down. She'll be right back up. So Freedom.
Yes, I'm here. I just had it on mute. I don't know if you had answered the question that I asked you I just want to make sure that I'm clear about it. I hate to have to repeat it, but I'm going to ask it again. What was the main reason? And I know it's what Dots is talking about, the classification, to fool us, to trick us, to mentally just take us away from who we truly are. But did you ever answer the question that I asked about why so many names before being called African American? And like I said, I think that that's another form of trick mind. But if you did answer it, could you answer it again for the people that have just
We
come
never
in?
got to the answer. We never got to the answer.
Okay, okay.
Look,
Because
if
like I
you
said,
look at the intervals, if you look at 20 years on average, and that's just long enough for the next generation to be re-instructed to keep us confused. It's a flea flicker. It's a trick play. It's a razzle dazzle.
mm,
It's a 3-card money. It's the 3 shell game. I'm gonna give you all these different names and you're gonna pick one. But ain't none of them got nothing to do with you. Right? Then they got what they call catch terms that also add to the confusion. Because the catch terms are designed to group multiple tribes under one banner, like Cherokee. The root tribes to Cherokee, the Aniwaya, and it's another one I can't. They hard to pronounce. I don't know English, but these was the root tribes, and then all of the tribes was adopting settlers, and then the government was saying, well, since he looked like the ones we put in power, we gonna have him sign the treaty. Then he wasn't authorized to sign the treaty. Your president can't declare him a chief just so he could sign the treaty. And that's what they was doing. All this is to disassociate us from the land. And you can thank Jesse Jackson for the African American moniker. He went to all of the so-called leaders of the day and said, we need to be called African American. And they fell for it. And all of the Rainbow Coalition and the Operation Push and the NAACP and all of those what we call bourgeoisie organizations all jumped on board because Jesse said that, and we was putting a lot of trust in Jesse. Go back and pull up the song "Run Jesse Run." It's like 2-3 versions of it when he was running for president, where all of the celebrities was supporting him. And all the time, he wasn't trying to do nothing but get another bag. It's all about the money. Him and his son wrote a book, and he flat out to you on the cover. It's all about the money.
But what
just like he got that back.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just like he got that brown paper bag after the assassination of Martin Luther King. He wasn't the only one. It was about 7 Christian preachers involved in Martin Luther King's assassination and setup that was intricately involved. And they all got a big paper bag full of money when it was over with. And it all came out in the lawsuit.
But
so it ain't like they can hide because we know who they is now.
No, I was going to say they had to find a way to romance it, because I just can't imagine, because then I would start to think that we are our own worst enemy again, that we have allowed every time they want to change it, we just go along with the change, or we romance it from for whatever reasons we make good of what they gave us bad, even including religion. Black, I'm Black and I'm proud. Everything that they give us or put upon us, we willingly take. Why? Why are they romantic for us to just sit back and take this?
When I look back and I found out that the reference to Black was to the ones who was actually fighting actively in the war against the ones classified as free white persons in law, that cleared it all up for me. Just because they classify all of the warrior priest clans, the Black Wolf clan, the Black Eagle clan, the Black Hawk clan, the Black Leopard, which is the Black Panther clan. And then they just said, dropped all of the totem animals off and just said black, which was actually not talking about the same thing as the European language is talking about, but that's the closest they could come up with in the translations. Because remember, we wasn't speaking English, French, German, Portuguese, Spanish. We weren't speaking none of that when they came over here. All of a sudden, now we Hebrews, and we spoke Hebrew before they came over here. And we didn't even know what the Bible was before 1492. So make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
If we didn't know what the Bible was, then we didn't know what Hebrew was, because we became Israelites and Hebrews through biblical doctrination that was brought over here. Everybody wanted to be classified as the chosen people of God. And as soon as God chooses the people, that means everybody else is destined to die right now. Ain't nobody living but the ones God chose.
Wait, you
well, everybody that's breathing right now is chosen by God, or they wouldn't be breathing.
I like how you said that. Everybody want to be the chosen one. I like how you said that.
Yeah. It's a justification for the suffering inflicted. In order for me to suffer this bad, I got to be chosen by God. Therefore, my deductive reason, I got to be a Hebrew Israelite, because that's the only place where I find that God chose somebody to be better than everybody else. And these are the ones that are doing all of the miscreant activities of a derelict and a deviant, and God chose them. That don't make sense to me. And then they turn around and say God chose the righteous people. Why he choose the righteous people when the people that say that they chosen is doing all the dirt?
Right.
That don't make sense to me. They the ones behind all the wars. They funding both sides of them. They hiding out in caves all over the world because they don't want the real people to see them and recognize them for who they is. They live in gated communities when they live around people that look like them, so they don't get mixed up and as being the same people.
Right. Malcolm said it. What did Malcolm say about Plymouth Rock?
We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. That goes to
that's what you were saying about America. America ended up landing on us. Nonprofit organization called the United States.
The Mayflower was the Plymouth. And the crash site is memorialized with a rock called the Plymouth Rock. This was the justification for the King of England to park a ship in the Bay of DC. The Navy then ran them out of there. Now they can't come back. Because this is where they was collecting all of the birth certificates in the registration certificates. Before there was birth certificates, they was having you register to be a citizen. It was the equivalent of a birth certificate before the birth certificate, but you could get one as an adult because they was establishing a stronghold on the land. So you had to go file for citizenship. Just like an immigrant. If you wanted to work, you needed your free papers, your state ID, your driver's license, so you can work in the slave colonies called the Americas. They told us they were slave colonies. I don't know why we act like this is something different now, 400 years later, because they wear uniforms and make them more legitimate than the ones from the land who walk around. We don't wear feathers every day. That was ceremonial dress, and they exaggerated feathers all over us. Like, come on, man, be serious.
I want you to get into. I just want you to speak on about the origins of the Kente, the dashikis, right? Please do that. And the origins of that and where that come from, and then I want to get into the miseducation of the Negro and talk about the slave trade a little bit.
You know what a poncho is?
Of course.
Okay, they have us believing that that's Spanish God. But you're not going to find nobody in the ancient pictures of Spain. They got drawings, paintings, They none of them going to have on a poncho. A dashiki was a lighter fabric used to make a poncho. This is a southwestern tribal dress that you can still see painted in the pyramids in southern Mexico. The dashiki is not African. You got to remember, until the settlers went over there, the majority of Africans was topless. You can't remember, it get like 110 degrees over there in some of them countries. But we don't look at the history of like how people dress 2 years ago. We just took it that during the Black Power movement of the 60s and the 70s, and us wearing the dashiki and saying, "What's up, brother?" that we thought that meant that was an African garb. That's not African in origin. It's just like a sundress. Women over here created the sundress. That's not an African dress. They wore different types of skins and grasses as clothes. They didn't wear weaved fabrics like we was wearing. They was wearing their own. They had their own culture. You got to remember, cotton comes from America. It was transported to Egypt thousands of years ago, but it originated over here. That's why cotton farming was so common, because it was routine over here already. We all of this stuff is to confuse who we are to us. They already know who we is. They not arguing if we indigenous to the land or not. They arguing as if we aware of it. While we arguing whether we from Africa, what religion we is, what political party we belong to, all of that stuff, the divide and conquer tactics that they've been using, they don't argue over none of it because they laughing at us fighting over those petty differences that they created in order to keep us have us so busy fighting about trifles that we can't fight for the land and the wealth. It's a difference. When you inherit the land, all of the mineral wealth comes with the inheritance. It's the birthright of the mother lines and the clans, but it's the victor's booty in a time of war.
Wow. Dulcie, you wanted to say something before I ask my other question?
No, you're good.
Okay. So we started out with the misclassification, right? Of quote unquote Negro. Let's talk about the misclassification of the miseducation now. We're gonna get into the miseducation of the quote unquote Negro, right? Okay, so at the beginning you had mentioned, the indoctrination that our babies face when they go into schools and them books and what's told in them books, right? So I'm gonna continue that walk. Okay. So in schools, and I know even growing up, when I think of my history classes, for example, and I think of what was written about what was supposed to be my history, right? It always begins and ends with the slave trade. Okay. And so the books will say that there was no culture in the Americas until the enslaved Africans got here and developed it, right? But let's unpack that just a little bit, because I would think that there has to be many reasons why nations across the pond, across the Atlantic, would deem it necessary to war with each other, shed bloodshed, send their people over as indentured servants, invest in ships to reach the Americas, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And part of that is because there had to be a thriving and intact culture, people, food, arable land to capitalize on, right? And then, like, prior to the 1400s, there were millions. There were people here in the Americas allowing the colonizers and what they would say the enslaved Africans to diffuse into and acculturate into, right? And then when I think of like, okay, we think about like the slave records and the sources, and at best it will tell you that there was a very small percentage of Africans to come to the United States of America, maybe 4 to 6% at best. That's the highest, okay? And I think, how does 4 to 6% of enslaved, bondaged people birth over 100 million people today? Birth the richness, the culture that we have today. How is that possible?
Well, the first thing is you got to go back to Columbus' journals, where he talked about the nature and the characteristics and the wealth of the land in his journals, right? And he also talked about the kind-heartedness and what he perceived to be gullibility of the people, right? But he thought what he thought was gullibility was a kind heart, right? So once you get back to that point and you realize